Good morning and welcome to Daily Cyber Briefing for Tuesday, the 6th of May. I'm Stephen Ridgway. Those of you in the UK, hope you had a good bank holiday weekend. Google has released fixes for various Android flaws. In fact, 46 Android vulnerabilities have been patched in this month's Google Android updates. Particular vulnerability to be aware of is CVE 2025-27363 with a CVSS score of 8.1, which is a vulnerability in the free type open source font rendering library. That's actually the original vulnerability was disclosed by Facebook in March. It has now worked its way into Android patches. So if you are using an Android mobile device, would definitely recommend that you look to address, at the very least, get that one addressed quickly. It allows access to system level code execution without the need to escalate privileges on the device. So user interaction isn't needed for exploitation. So it's a fairly serious vulnerability there. There are various others, but as always, check that your device has updated itself. If it hasn't, give it a nudge. So we are in the industry aware of the fact that attackers, one of the areas of innovation over the last few years from an attacker's point of view has been how to disable endpoint protection solutions. Well, there's one variation on this which has been seen been seen to be used to disable SentinelOne's EDR solution, but my suspicion is that the same process could be, or the same approach could be used with various EDR. If not all, many I'm sure will be vulnerable to this. And the concept is that if you run an installer to update your EDR tooling, at some point it has to terminate the old process and restart the new process in order to apply the updates to the running solution on the device. So a particular attacker group has been spotted bringing a SentinelOne installer, running it and then terminating it at the point where it's stopped the old process, but before it's undertaken any upgrade activities or restarted the SentinelOne EDR processes. So it's a very, very simple attack chain. Run the installer, and then using MSI exec, stop the service at a particular point. I suppose the skill in it is knowing the right point in which to stop the installer before it restarts anything else. But that would, if you've got that level of access to the device, you can very likely be able to see that was going on anyway. So now my feeling is that this would probably work with all sorts of other things as well. So just be aware. Add this to your list of things that you've got detection rules for. One thing, of course, that will be obvious is if you're actively monitoring your EDR solutions across your environments, or corporate environments, in particular. You should be getting alerts when the processes stop and when processes restart. So it would be relatively straightforward to write, and hopefully you're ingesting those alerts into your security visibility tooling or your SIEM or whatever you're using. So it would be relatively straightforward to write a detection rule that spotted that the process has stopped, but nothing has restarted, or it hasn't restarted. So that would be maybe a starting point. Specifically for Sentinel-1, there is a mitigation that can be applied, which is to enable online authorization, which basically means that the installer won't do anything until it has been authorized to do the upgrades or whatever it may be via the web console. So if you are using Sentinel-1 as an interim, whilst you're thinking about longer term fixes to this, or whilst Sentinel-1 potentially looking at how they're going to address this vulnerability, if this was kind of an architectural vulnerability rather than a sort of coding type vulnerability. Use online authorization if you can, and have a think about what you can do next. Another area that we have spoken about quite a lot over the last year or so is the use of commercially available tooling for communications in secure environments. So it kind of comes out of that shadow IT world where if you can provide the most secure ways in which employees should do their jobs, but if they feel like there's a quicker or easier, or these days, sadly, I suspect a more attractive way of doing it, using tools they like better, then things spring up. So, hands up, whose organization can be absolutely certain that the employees don't have WhatsApp groups of their own that are outside of corporate control. And if anybody's got their hands up, you're either lying or you're not aware of what's going on. Well, it looks like the US government uses modified commercial apps, including things like Signal. They've been modified by an Israeli-US company called Telemessage that adds in missing features effectively. And a particular example would be archiving, central archiving of all chats. Now, that's a regulatory requirement if you are, let's say, in the part of the federal government, one way or another in the US. These chats have to be archived somewhere. So one of these telemessage modified apps, they've been seen to be modifying sort of Signal, WhatsApp, Telegram, WeChat, and so on and so forth. So one of them is Signal. It's the app itself is generally known as TM SGNL Signal, so TM Signal. It appears that the archives have been compromised. Now, it then appears that the archives are being held at Telemessage or by Telemessage controlled servers. Looks like in part of the Amazon cloud. Now, whether that's S3 bucket or whatever it might be, I'm not personally totally sure. However, it does look like, even though Signal is a stable and secure messaging, end-to-end encrypted messaging service, The archives are stored in clear text. So wait to see what comes out of this, but I suspect that there will be a whole lot of information which will now leak out, which really shouldn't have done. So why am I bringing this to your attention? Well, if you are in any way dealing with federal government, of course, this may directly impact conversations or processes or whatever to deal with that stuff. So be aware stuff may be out there that directly affects you. But as a more general point, it is worth thinking about the fact that there are properly secure communication systems which are available, were available to parts of the federal government that have been caught up in this particular leak. What is it that is preventing the people from using the right, as it were, the right tooling? And also, how come these other tools appear to have got in? So have a think about how you are controlling the communications that are being used. Now, you can't really deal with the purely shadow IT stuff, little user groups or a bunch of employees who've kicked off a let's meet up and get drunk at the weekend type WhatsApp group. But should you really be using these sorts of things for line of business, and certainly line of business that might well be secure, needs a bit of thought. Okay, and then finally, from me, there's an article that I come across in Cybersecurity News, which clarifies or helps to clarify some of the new rules around ransomware payments in the public sector in the UK. So basically, hopefully, if you are affected by this, you're already aware, but the UK government has now effectively banned the payment of ransoms during ransomware attacks in an attempt to reduce the commercial attractiveness for attacker groups going after public sector organizations. I'm not convinced that it will make a huge amount of difference. I think it will add a lot of bureaucracy and potentially end up with some otherwise very honest people being prosecuted for making what they believe to be good judgment. Should these things be left to good judgment, or should these sorts of things be legislated? Well, I'm not one for legislating for everything. I've lived in Germany. I've seen how just bloody horrible it is trying to live in a world where everything is forbidden unless specifically permitted by law. But there we are. We're run by a lawyer at the moment, so who knows? We may end up there. So yeah, I think this whole area has missed the point. Right? Paying a ransom in order to what are you paying the ransom to get? Access to your systems. Stop people publishing your data. You've got absolutely no guarantee that if you pay, you're going to get the outcomes that you're expecting. You're dealing with people who were dishonest enough to steal from you in the first place. Why do you think that if you pay them money, they are going to then all of a sudden become honest citizens and behave nicely and stick to the letter of their contract with you? And what are you going to do? Breach them for, sue them for breach of contract if you pay them and your data still leaks, or you pay for the ransomware decryption keys and they don't work, or you find you've decrypted stuff and it's all been fucked up and it's full of backdoors and other holes that other attackers can use or they can use to regain access. What are you going to do? It's just really a false economy trying to pay to shortcut the process of recovering your stuff. So very much more important is to be able to recover independent of what your attacker has done to you. And if you are paying because you need to recover systems for which you have no other method of recovering them, I mean, really, that's probably symptomatic of there being all sorts of other problems inside your organization. And yeah, that one needs a bit of thought. But yeah, if you work in the public sector and you pay a ransom during a ransomware attack, be aware you might have broken the law now. Right, that's all from me for today. Hope you have a good start to the week, and I'll speak to you again tomorrow.